I was in the hospital waiting room, trembling, my cell phone slipping between my sweaty fingers as I tried to call my son for the 10th time that morning. The call didn't even ring. It went straight to voicemail, as if my number simply didn't exist for him anymore. That's when the nurse approached and said I needed to fill out an emergency form, and there, in that moment of absolute panic, with my husband Paul being rushed into heart surgery, I discovered I had been blocked by my own son, by the boy I carried in my womb for 9 months, whom I held in my arms during sleepless nights of fever, whom I fed with my own body, whom I saw take his first wobbly steps towards my open arms. Raffaele had erased me from his life with a touch on the screen. My fingers were shaking so much that I could barely type the message to my sister Clara, begging her to try to talk to Raffaele. Paul is on the operating table. It's serious. Please let my son know. I could barely see the letters through the tears blurring my vision. The pain in my chest wasn't just the fear of losing my husband. It was the silent stabbing of knowing that, in the moment I needed my son most, he had chosen to make me disappear, as if 32 years of unconditional love could be deleted as easily as an unwanted app. I sat in that cold, hard plastic chair, watching the double doors through which they had taken Paul, and my mind began to wander. How did I get here? How did the woman who dedicated every second of her existence to her family find herself alone, abandoned, invisible? I closed my eyes and allowed myself to go back in time, even though each memory was a deeper cut in the wound that was already bleeding. I was 23 years old when Raffaele was born. 23 years of youth, of dreams kept in drawers, of diplomas I never finished because life had other plans for me. Paul and I lived in a tiny apartment where the smell of dampness competed with the scent of baby powder. I worked part-time as a secretary, woke up at 5 in the morning to prepare everything before taking Raffaele to my mother's house, rushed to the office, returned at lunchtime to breastfeed, returned to work, and at night, after picking up my son, I still had to take care of the house, dinner, clothes. Paul worked double shifts as a salesman, rarely home before 10 at night. We were young, exhausted, and in love with the child who illuminated our tiny world. The years passed in an exhausting routine of sacrifices that I never considered sacrifices. I gave up my pedagogy degree when Raffaele started nursery school. He had crying fits every morning, and I couldn't bear to see him suffer. I decided to stay home, take care of him full-time, ensure he had the childhood I didn't have. Paul took on more responsibilities at work, started traveling more, but I never complained. Someone needed to be that child's safe harbor, and I chose to be that person. I was the mother who made elaborate costumes for school parties, who woke up at dawn to prepare his favorite cake, who never missed a performance, a parent-teacher conference, a soccer game. When Raffaele was 8 years old and broke his arm falling off his bicycle, I was the one who slept in the hospital for 5 nights straight, sitting in an uncomfortable chair, holding his little hand while he moaned in pain. When he failed math in high school, I was the one who hired a private tutor with the money I had secretly saved to buy a new washing machine. When he wanted to do an exchange program in his senior year of high school, I was the one who convinced Paul to take out a loan, because our son's dreams couldn't wait. Raffaele came back different from that exchange program. More self-assured, more ambitious, but also more distant. He had met Mariana there, a girl from a wealthy family, with straight, perfect hair, always impeccable nails, and a smile that never reached her eyes when she looked at me. From the first day she set foot in our house, I felt something strange, a coldness disguised as politeness. She greeted with air kisses, looked around as if she were evaluating a property to rent, and always had a comment about how things could be more modern, or more practical. "Donna Helena, do you still use those embroidered dish towels? How vintage," she said once, with a giggle that sounded like broken glass in my ears. I had embroidered each of those towels on the sleepless nights when Raffaele was a baby, each stitch a silent prayer for our future. But for Mariana, they were just relics of an era she despised. Raffaele graduated in administration, with honors thanks to the sleepless are staying close by in case you need help. I was not okay. I could only see my granddaughter once a month, and even then, it was always under Mariana and Susanna's watchful eyes. It was like they were afraid I'd contaminate her with my simplicity. One day I decided to take matters into my own hands. I went to the apartment unannounced, determined to spend a few hours alone with Laura. Mariana answered the door with a frown. "Donna Helena, What a surprise, she said sarcastically. Laura is sleeping. You can't come in now. I just want to see her for a few minutes, I pleaded. It's been weeks. I'm sorry, it's not a good time, she replied, starting to close the door. That was when I lost it. All the accumulated pain, the condescension, the absence of my son, the deprivation of my granddaughter, it all exploded in a torrent of words. Enough, Mariana. I am her grandmother. I have the right to see her, to love her, to be a part of her life. You can't keep me away like this. Mariana stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. Then she let out a shrill laugh. The right? You have no right to anything. You're just Rafale's mother, a woman who always worked too hard and never knew how to dress properly. You're nothing like us. Her words hit me like a slap. I stood there, speechless, feeling as if all the air had been sucked out of my lungs. In that moment, I understood that the distance between us was not just physical. It was a chasm of values, of social classes, of worlds that would never meet. I turned and walked away, my heart shattered into a million pieces. I knew that things would never be the same again. She's already on a very rigid sleep schedule. We're having construction done at home. My family is coming to visit. When I finally did manage to see my granddaughter, it was always supervised, always with Mariana watching me, as if I were about to commit some terrible crime. If I picked Laura up, she'd immediately claim it was bath time. If I sang to her, Mariana would say the baby wasn't used to old songs. If I offered to help with anything, the answer was no need, everything's under control. It was then that I began to realize my contact with Rafale was being filtered as well. My messages took hours or days to be answered. My calls went to voicemail more and more frequently. When he finally did return them, it was always brief, always with background noise. Mariana calling, the baby crying, something boiling on the stove. Once I overheard him say quietly to someone, "It's my mom again, I'll call you later," and that hurt more than any explicit insult could. Paul noticed my sadness, but didn't know how to help. "They're young, honey. They have their own lives now. We need to give them space," he said, trying to comfort me. But space was different from exclusion. Space was different from being treated like a nuisance, like an inconvenient presence that needed to be managed and controlled. The last straw came on Laura's first birthday. I wasn't invited. I found out about the party on social media, through photos Mariana's sister posted. There were pink balloons everywhere, a professional candy table, clowns, a princess decoration that must have cost a fortune. And I, the maternal grandmother, wasn't there. I called Rafale, trembling with indignation and pain, and he took 2 days to return my call. When he finally did, his voice was cold, distant. "Mom, it was a small party, just close family and intimate friends. I didn't want to bother you." Close family. I wasn't close family anymore. It was after that the calls stopped completely. I called, and it went straight to voicemail. I sent a message and didn't receive a reply. I tried WhatsApp, SMS, Facebook. Nothing. It was my sister Clara, who finally confirmed after talking to a friend, whose daughter was Mariana's colleague. "Helena, I didn't want to tell you like this, but it seems like you've been blocked. Mariana supposedly told someone that you were being very intrusive, that you didn't respect their boundaries, and that Raphael agreed to block you so they could have peace." Intrusive. Me, who had dedicated my whole life to my son, who had given up everything to ensure his success, his happiness. Me, who never charged anything, never asked for recognition, never demanded attention. I was intrusive for wanting to be part of my granddaughter's life, for wanting to hug my son, for wanting to be a mother, a grandmother, family. And it was exactly in this state, in this open and bleeding wound, that Paul had the heart attack. We were having dinner, talking about banal things, when he put his hand on his chest, and his face turned gray. The ambulance arrived in 15 minutes, that seemed like 15 hours. At the hospital, when the doctor said it was serious, that he needed emergency surgery, my first instinct was to call Rafale. My son needed to know. He loved his father, and it was then that I discovered I couldn't even let him know that his father could die. Clara managed to talk to Rafale, through a mutual friend. He arrived at the hospital, 2 hours after the surgery had started, with Mariana glued to his side, like a possessive shadow. When he saw me, his face closed up. There was no hug, no words of comfort. "How is he?" was all he said, in a voice so formal, he seemed to be talking to a stranger. Mariana stayed by his side, watching my every move as if I were a threat. I couldn't take it. All the pain, all the humiliation, all the injustice that I had swallowed silently in recent years exploded in that cold, antiseptic hospital corridor. Raffaele, you blocked me, I said, and my voice came out trembling but firm. Your father is fighting for his life in the operating room, and I couldn't even let you know because you blocked me. Me, your mother, who carried you, who raised you, who gave up everything for you. He looked away, uncomfortable, but Mariana stepped forward, with that fake smile firmly planted on her face. Helena, we needed space. You were being a little intense. You called a lot, sent a lot of messages, always showed up unannounced. That's not healthy for a young couple with a baby. Intense. I was being intense for loving my son, for wanting to meet my granddaughter. And you. I turned to Raffaele, ignoring Mariana completely for the first time. Do you agree with this? Do you think I deserve to be treated like this, after everything? He finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that gave me hope, conflict, doubt, maybe even guilt. But then Mariana touched his arm, a light but possessive touch, and the mask returned. Mom, can we talk about this later? Now's not the time. Now's not the time. My voice rose, and I didn't care that other patients' family members were watching us. When will it be the time, Raffaele? When I die, and you can't even bother to tell me? When your daughter grows up without even knowing her other grandmother, because you let your wife erase me from your life? It was then that Clara arrived, coming from the cafeteria, and stopped in the middle of the hallway. When she sensed the tension, she knew me too well. She could read every nuance on my face. What's going on here? She asked, and her voice had that natural authority she always had, even though she was 3 years younger than me. Nothing much, Aunt Clara. Mariana hurried to answer, with her professional smile. Just a misunderstanding. You know how it is, stressful moments make people sensitive. Clara looked at me, then looked at Raffaele, and something in her changed. She took 2 steps towards my son, and her voice was low but cutting like a blade. Raffaele, did you block your mother on your phone? Silence. Raffaele, answer. We needed boundaries, Aunt. Things were complicated. Complicated, Clara repeated, and let out a humorless laugh. Let me tell you what's complicated. My dear nephew, complicated was your mother working as a cleaning lady, hidden from everyone, to pay for part of your wedding. Complicated was her waking up at 4 in the morning, for years to prepare your coffee and your school lunch before going to work. Complicated was her giving up her own happiness, her own dreams, to make sure you had everything. Clara turned to Mariana. And you, young lady, think you have the right to decide who is or isn't part of the family? Who do you think you are? Mariana paled, but kept her chin up. I'm his wife, the mother of his daughter, and I have the right to protect my family from negative influences. Negative influences. Clara's voice rose an octave. The woman who raised this boy is a negative influence. The woman who is here, alone, desperate because her husband is dying and her son wasn't available, because he decided to block her, is a negative influence. It was then that the surgery room door opened, and the doctor came out, still in his surgical scrubs. We all froze. He looked around, found my face, and walked towards me. Mrs. Helena, the surgery was successful. Your husband will recover, but he will need rest and monitoring for a few months. My legs weakened, and Clara held me up. The tears I had been holding back finally fell, a torrent of relief, exhaustion, and accumulated pain. Raffaele took a step towards me, but I raised my hand, stopping him. No, I said, and my voice was firmer than ever. Not now. You made your choice, Raffaele. You chose her and her boundaries, instead of your mother. You chose to block the woman who gave you life, because she sent too many messages, because she cared too much, because she loved you too much. I looked at Mariana. And you got what you wanted. Congratulations. You isolated my son from his family. Mom, it's not like that. Raffaele started, but I interrupted him. It's exactly like that. And you know what? I'm tired. Tired of being treated like a nuisance. Tired of asking permission to love my son and my granddaughter. Tired of being the villain in the story you built to justify excluding me. I took a deep breath, feeling something break inside me, but also something strengthen. I'm going to take care of your father. He needs me, and when he gets better, we're going to rebuild our life. A life in which we don't have to beg for crumbs of affection from those who should love us unconditionally. Helena. Raffaele took another step, and this time, I saw tears in his eyes. Good, he should cry. He should feel at least a fraction of the pain he had caused me. When you decide to be my son again, when you decide that your mother deserves more than to be blocked and excluded, you know where to find me. But until then, respect my choice in the same way you demanded that I respect yours. Stay with your wife and your perfect family, and leave this invasive old woman alone. I turned my back and walked towards the recovery room, where Paulo was being taken. Clara came with me, her hand firm on my shoulder. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see Raffaele's face. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing my pain, or the opportunity to make me give in with tears and empty words. Paulo was hospitalized for a week. Raffaele showed up once, alone, without Mariana. We talked briefly, formally, like polite strangers. He asked about the treatment, about the recovery, offered financial help. I thanked him and refused. I didn't want anything from him that wasn't genuine love, and that, alone, he seemed unable to give at the moment. In the following months, something changed in me. The pain was still there, sharp and present, but I learned to live with it. I went back to doing things I had abandoned years ago. I resumed crochet lessons with Clara, started attending a book club at the library, made new friends at the senior center gym. Paulo and I started traveling, short, modest trips, but ours. We rediscovered each other after years of putting our son at the center of everything, and life went on, lighter, in a way, without the constant anxiety of trying to be good enough to be loved, without the weight of carrying a one-sided relationship. I learned that love shouldn't hurt so much, that being a mother doesn't mean accepting crumbs, that you can love someone deeply and still choose your own dignity. Raffaele texted 6 months later, a long text apologizing, saying he had realized many things, that Mariana had started therapy, that he was also in therapy, that he wanted to rebuild our relationship. I read the message 3 times, felt my heart tighten, but I didn't reply immediately. This time, the reconciliation would be on my terms, on my time, if it happened. Because the biggest lesson I learned on this painful journey was this: you teach people how to treat you. For years, I taught my son that he could ignore me, exclude me, treat me as optional, and I would still be there, unconditional and available. Now, I was teaching a different lesson, that I had value, that my love was not an acquired right, but a gift that needed to be honored, that I wasn't just the mother who gave everything. I was Helena, a complete woman, with dignity, dreams and boundaries. And if you are going through something similar, let this story be your strength. You are not intrusive for loving. You are not overreacting for caring. You are not the problem for demanding the bare minimum of respect. Motherhood is not an endless sacrifice where you disappear. You matter. Your feelings matter. Your pain matters. And it's okay to choose yourself, to protect your heart, to say no to relationships that diminish you, even when they come from the people you love most. Today, as I write this, Paulo is by my side, recovered, and more present than ever. Raffaele and I are in a slow process of rapprochement, with clear boundaries, with honest conversations, with family therapy. Mariana and I will probably never be close, but we have learned to coexist with mutual respect. And Laura, my sweet granddaughter, is starting to know me for real, without filters, without excessive supervision. The wound is still there. Maybe it always will be, but I learned to exist beyond it. I learned that I can be a mother and still be whole, that I can love without losing myself, that I can forgive without forgetting, and mainly, that my story doesn't end in being rejected. It continues in how I chose to get up afterwards, in how I rebuilt my dignity piece by piece, in how I learned that self-love is not selfishness, but survival. If you've made it this far, know that your journey also doesn't end in pain. It begins with your decision not to accept less than you deserve, in your courage to set boundaries, even when it hurts, in your strength to choose yourself when no one else does. You are not alone, and you will survive this too, stronger, wiser, and more aware of your own worth.